Happy Monday, and welcome back to the Lorden Arts channel. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here today. Case Cracked is the show where we look into a mystery. And what are the critical pieces that help solve that mystery? Today's episode is called Be Careful What You Wish For. Sometimes people need a reboot to close up one chapter and get a new start in life. Nancy Crampton was one of those people. After her marriage to a police officer fizzled out around 1990, they divorced and she moved from Texas to Portland, Oregon. There, she enrolled in Western Culinary Institute and met Daniel Brophy, a divorced culinary instructor. Their friendship grew, and soon the two friends were dating. In 1999, they were married in a large ceremony. However, none of the paperwork for the marriage was filed and made official until June 14th, 2016. Daniel loved everything about cooking. He had a large garden in their backyard whose herbs could be found in their home meals and were also sold at the culinary school from a little cart. As he honed his craft, Nancy experimented with several career ideas before she became the owner of a catering company that she ran for more than a decade. When COVID-19 hit, business slowed down, and Nancy went from initially laying off employees to shutting the business entirely. She began selling life insurance and Medicare policies. Her real passion, however, was writing romance novels. With books named The Wrong Husband and The Wrong Lover, her books sold little, but according to her, weren't written for profit, but for the joy of doing it. In 2018, Nancy and Daniel were in their 60s, with their retirement years fast approaching. After 26 years together, she described her married life on her blog as, "I'm married to a chef whose mantra is, life is a science project. As a result, there are chickens and turkeys in my backyard, a vegetable garden which also grows tobacco for an insecticide, and a hot meal on the table every night. For those of you who have longed for this, let me caution you. The old adage is true. Be careful what you wish for. When the gods are truly angry, they grant us our wishes." On June 2nd, 2018, at 7:21 a.m., Daniel arrived at the culinary school to prep for the class he was teaching. Between 8 and 8:30 a.m., as students entered the school, they were shocked to find Daniel on the floor in the rear of the kitchen, lying in a pool of blood. Someone yelled to call 911, and another student began administering CPR. Soon, they realized the effort was fruitless. Paramedics arrived and declared him deceased. An autopsy would show that Daniel had been shot twice, once in the back, the other in the chest at close range by a 9mm handgun. When the police arrived, friends began to call Nancy with news that someone at the Culinary Institute had been shot. She talked to people back and forth before making a call to Dan's mother, who insisted that she go to the school and check on him. Nancy said no, there was too much of a police presence. When his mother insisted, she finally drove down to the school and talked to officers. In a recorded interview, they broke the news to her that her husband had been shot and killed. She said, "Yeah, I got that when everyone gave me a sad sack look." It was almost an hour later before she even asked where Dan was. This behavior seemed odd to investigators, so they questioned Nancy's friends and family. All of them replied that the two seemed to have a loving marriage. Nancy claimed that she had been home all morning. However, when CCTV footage around the institute was checked, investigators found that Nancy was actually there between 6:39 and 7:28 a.m. When they pressed her on that, she changed her story and said it was merely a coincidence that her car was seen near the school. She said she liked to drive around the area looking for inspiration. Neighbors claimed that when she returned home that morning, she was distraught and claimed she was upset because her dogs had gotten out of the house. None of her neighbors saw the dogs outside that morning. Just days after Dan's death, Nancy not only got rid of his beloved chickens, but she also asked police to provide her with a letter that stated she was not a suspect in her husband's death. She claimed that the insurance company required it before they would pay out his $40,000 life insurance policy. The police's investigation showed that it wasn't just $40,000 that she would stand to collect, but more like $1.5 million in life insurance policies. It was also revealed that the couple was in debt, but would pay nearly $1,000 a month for their life insurance policies, even if that meant missing mortgage payments on their home. Nancy claimed that this was all part of their retirement plan, but the family said they never talked to them about retirement. Investigators also found that Nancy had a criminal history that involved embezzlement, fraud, and identity theft. There were 3 other things that stood out to them about Nancy. First, there was her essay titled, "How to Murder Your Husband." Written 7 years before Dan's death, Nancy published the essay on her blog. The 700-word post detailed the pros and cons of killing your spouse. Quote, "If the murder is supposed to set me free, I certainly don't want to spend any time in jail. And let me say clearly for the record, I don't like jumpsuits and orange isn't my color. But the thing I know about murder is that every one of us have it in him or her when pushed far enough." Next was the iTunes account Nancy shared with Dan. On it, investigators found an article called 10 Ways to Cover Up a Murder that Nancy had bookmarked. However, the most telling pieces of evidence found were the 9mm Glock 17 and ghost gun she bought before Dan's murder. According to CBS News, a ghost gun is an unregistered and untraceable homemade weapon, usually made with a 3D printer or assembled from a kit. She had apparently ordered a ghost gun kit online, and she bought the Glock 17 at a local expo. She also bought another slide and barrel for the Glock. When asked, she surrendered the weapons to the officers, but not the additional slide and barrel that she had purchased. Those were never found, and the rifling on the bullets recovered from Dan didn't match the guns surrendered to police. Investigators believe that she was unable to piece the ghost gun together, so she bought the Glock. Before the murder, she swapped the barrel and slide and followed Dan to school, where she shot him. She then disposed of the slide and barrel and placed the original back on the gun. Nancy claimed that the ghost gun was bought as research for a book she was writing, but the 9mm was bought when she and Dan decided to buy a gun for safety. His family disputed this, however, saying that Dan was not a gunman. On September 5th, 2018, officers arrested Nancy. Her response was, "Oh, you must think I killed my husband." All of the evidence presented at trial was circumstantial. The defense argued that a homeless person entered the school on the morning of the murder and killed Dan in a robbery gone wrong. The prosecution countered with a jailhouse confession. A former cellmate of Nancy's claimed that she was told by Nancy that, quote, "he was shot 2 times to the heart, and she showed me the distance." She said that Nancy then stretched out her arms and said it was about this far. Jurors agreed with the prosecutors and found her guilty of the second-degree murder of her husband. Nancy was sentenced to life in prison. After the trial, Dan's family spoke out. They were happy with the court's verdict, but it'll still never replace their loved one. Dan's son from his first marriage, Nathaniel Stillwater, had this to say: "You opted to lie, steal, cheat, fraud, ultimately killed the man that was, for some reason still unbeknownst to me, your biggest fan. You executed my father in an act of cold-blooded, premeditated murder, the man that did everything for you. The pain you have delivered to us is immeasurable. Your theft of a parent and grandfather for such selfish reasons is unforgivable." We can only hope those words will give Nancy a lot to think about during her life sentence. Case cracked. I would like to thank CNN.com, DocumentCloud.org, The Guardian, TDN.com, CBS News, KGW.com, and OregonLive.com. Of course, the biggest thank you goes to Christy Arnhart for researching and writing up today's case, and here she is now to discuss it with us. Christy, one of the big questions I have after reviewing this case, and you did the research on it, so I'm hoping you might have a little more insight on this. What was the motive? Was it really that she was unhappy in love, or was it more about money. She's getting older. Maybe they didn't save well enough. She's thinking that's her way out. What do you think?
That's a tough one. I really had to think about that. I'm leaning more toward money.
Okay.
Now, a friend stated that in the year or so leading up to Daniel's death, Nancy had said to her 3 times that Daniel had changed. She said all he wanted to do was to lay around on the couch and watch sports. But when Karen Brophy, his mother, was talked to, she said that was unlike him and said that she told Nancy that maybe he was tired from working 2 jobs.
Okay. So it's still like I feel like we're split.
I know.
And
I
maybe
know.
what it is it's both. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
Christy and I were talking before the recording, and there, occasionally we look into stories where I feel like the person is almost living in a fantasy world. And here you have an author. You have someone that is used to putting themselves in an imagined environment and kind of exploring that imagination and writing characters and different actions to happen. Um, I almost feel like there is a very big fantasy component in terms of
Mm-hmm.
her putting this belief structure together that, oh, if only Daniel was dead, my whole life would be perfect, and then maybe she started putting together the pieces for that. It's a really interesting note right way at the start of the script that the paperwork for their marriage was not filed until 2016. So it almost shows like it wasn't that important to do it back at the time for some reason. They lived for years and years together where there was no reason for them to have filed it. Like I assume, I don't know if they bought property, but anytime you're doing any big financial purchase, it kind of comes up, like, are you married? Are you
Yes.
single? Um, so it's really interesting that there's that gap between getting the paperwork actually filed. And then I also looked into a little research on this too. They didn't just like kind of occasionally miss a house payment here or there. They fell like 6 months behind on house payments, but kept making that 800 and something dollar insurance premium payment month after month
Mm-hmm.
after month. So obviously the house wasn't part of her fantasy either. She would have
Yeah.
probably been fine if that just went and was taken from them, because she was going to wind up with 1.5 million, go buy her new dream mansion in Malibu, and then
Mm-hmm.
Fabio was going to show up in a Corvette, and they were going to roll off and be happy together for the rest of their lives. I don't know. Like, there's just such a weird, from my perspective, a weird fantasy component to this. But
Oh, there is. There
yeah.
is. I feel the same way there.
Now, I'm sure several of you out there probably picked up on this and are also curious, why was she charged with second degree murder?
Mhm.
And I know that I've heard sometimes it's harder to prove than first degree murder. And in this particular case, she gets a life sentence, so maybe second degree was enough. I mean, with her age, any sentence of 20 or 25 years is practically a life sentence anyway.
Yeah.
But to understand all this better, I thought we needed to review a little info this comes from manshorilaw.com. So Christy, let us know a little more about the differences between first and second.
Okay. A first degree murder must have 3 key aspects. The first is intent. A first degree murder must be committed with some sort of intent to kill the person. The murderer must therefore have attacked or harmed their victim with the purpose of ending their life or doing evil. Now, number 2 is deliberation and premeditation. Deliberation and premeditation are essentially parts of quantifying a first degree murder. This type of crime must be purposeful and planned out rather than simply occurring in the heat of the moment. Now, the third is malice aforethought. It's basically a legal term that means that a person who committed the crime did so with an intent to kill and a general disregard for human life.
So the main difference between that and second degree is really second degree, there's a lack of intent or planning.
Right.
It's something that just kind of happens in the moment.
Yes.
So it seems like it's really coming down to intent and premeditation. But you would think, I mean, we've talked about that the marriage license stuff wasn't submitted until 2016. We've
Mm-hmm.
got her writing an article about killing your spouse. We've got her bookmarking another article. We've got the purchase of the gun. Like, there's so many things that seem like they should have been able to easily prove intent.
Well, and they didn't even use her blog at trial.
Well, and I'm wondering about that because, it could be that during pre-trial they tried to enter it, and
Mm-hmm.
the other side opposed, and the judge basically said, "No, yeah, you can't use that."
And
Um,
still, I know they alluded to it, but
yeah,
I mean, they still got it.
yeah, yeah. So I don't know. It's weird because even just boiling it down to the guns, But I guess the story that she gave, the excuses she gave, maybe they couldn't disprove those. You couldn't disprove that she was doing research for a book of hers, and that's why she bought the ghost gun. And you couldn't disprove that her and her husband decided to arm themselves for
Hmm.
safety because he's not around to say that anymore. So yeah, it's a tough one, but obviously, if they got life in prison, I mean, that's that's what we're looking for with a case like this, anyway.
Yeah, it did its job regardless.
Yeah, yeah, and it sounds like this might not be her last visit to a courtroom.
No, no. In 2019, Nancy was sued by her stepson, Nathaniel Stillwater, for the wrongful death of his father. Now, the lawsuit calls for $200,000 for pain and suffering on Daniel's part before he died. Now, 500,000 is for financial losses for the Brophy family, and then 1 million of that is for Stillwater's loss of a parent. So he's suing her for about $1.7 million.
Now, I don't think that amount is a coincidence, considering that the insurance was to pay out about 1.5.
Mm-hmm.
They likely had the home still as an asset, which was probably worth. I mean, I don't know what type of home they had, but I'd imagine 100,000 to 200,000.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like he really is just trying to strip her of any, money that she might have made in this. Do we know if she actually got the insurance money?
Well, and this was interesting. Now, according to Investopedia.com,
Mm-hmm.
under the Slayer rule, if your beneficiary murders you, which really blows my mind,
Yeah.
or is somehow tied to your murder, they will not receive the death benefit. Instead, your insurer will pay out the death benefit to your contingent beneficiaries or to your estate.
Okay. So, a couple of potential problems there.
Mm-hmm.
If if she's the one that opened the policies and she was the only beneficiary listed, like his children might have not even been on the list. That could
I
probably
doubt it.
stop it. And then also paying out to the estate. Well, who's in control of the estate?
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's really interesting. Yeah, I went looking myself and I couldn't find any direct answer to if she was able to access this
Mm-hmm.
money in any way. But um, that money is supposed to go to someone, even under a murder case like this. It is supposed to wind up with someone. So it's if she doesn't have it, it's floating out there somewhere.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what part of this lawsuit is. Maybe it's just part of kind of egging that on and making sure that those proceeds go to the family.
Well,
And
very true.
instead of
And they
going to her.
should.
Yeah, definitely. Chrissy, thank you so much. We really appreciate all your hard work on today's episode, and I've got some other people to thank right now. Thank you, PayPal supporters Jennifer Dixon, Angela Welch Sola, and Amanda Beard. For over 6 years, we've always run limited commercial ads here on YouTube, and we can't do that without support. If you'd like to help the channel keep going and growing, please visit lordandarts.com. There you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, buy merchandise, or even just buy us a coffee, like Barbara T. recently did. We know that learning about the mechanisms that help support and find justice in these cases is important to understand the many unsolved cases we also cover, and we really appreciate your support in allowing us to continue doing that. Remember, you can get another Lord and Art story every week on the Seriously Mysterious podcast. A new episode is coming tomorrow, and every Tuesday after that, visit seriouslymysterious.com and subscribe on your favorite podcatchers. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon below if you want to catch one of our weekly Secret Studio live shows. And of course, I'll be back with a new unsolved mystery for you on Friday, right here on the Lord and Arts channel.